Over the past few years, America's housing market seemed to defy every rule in the book. Prices didn't just climb, they exploded. Bidding wars became the norm. Buyers waived inspections, threw cash offers around like confetti, and convinced themselves that real estate only moved in one direction: up. Home values in certain cities didn't just double. In some cases, they tripled within the span of a pandemic-fueled frenzy. Investors piled in, flippers got greedy, and regular families found themselves priced out of neighborhoods they'd lived in for generations. But 2026 has brought a reckoning nobody saw coming. The markets that soared the highest are now falling the hardest. Properties that were once considered bulletproof investments are sitting on the market for months with zero offers. Sellers who expected bidding wars are slashing prices just to generate interest. And the buyers who stretched every dollar to get in at the peak are now watching their equity evaporate in real time. In more than a dozen major metros across the country, home values aren't just softening, they're crashing. The kind of decline that reshapes entire communities, wipes out generational wealth, and forces a complete reset in how Americans think about homeownership. Today, we're counting down the top 15 places in America where houses are losing value in 2026. If you're thinking about buying, selling, or just trying to understand where the market is headed, you're going to want to stick around. And if you're into deep dives on real estate, economics, and the forces reshaping this country, make sure you hit that subscribe button right now, because this story is far from over. Let's get into it. Number 15, Spokane, Washington. Spokane doesn't usually make national headlines, and that's exactly how locals prefer it. But during the pandemic, this quiet city tucked in the eastern corner of Washington became ground zero for out-of-state buyers fleeing Seattle and Portland. Remote workers fell in love with the rivers, the mountains, and most importantly, the affordability. Between 2020 and 2023, home prices in Spokane shot up nearly 55%. Entire blocks that used to sell for under $200,000 were suddenly fetching $350,000 or more. Investors swooped in, convinced the growth would never stop. But in 2026, the dream has shattered. Home values have dropped roughly 8% year over year, and inventory is piling up fast. Houses in South Hill, Kendall Yards, and the North Side are sitting untouched for 60, 90, even 100 days. Sellers are cutting asking prices by $20,000, $30,000, sometimes more, and still not getting offers. The problem is straightforward. The people who drove Spokane's boom have left. Remote work mandates ended. Tech companies called employees back to headquarters. And the flood of Seattleites who once saw Spokane as an escape hatch have quietly returned to the coast. What's left is a local economy that never had the wages to support inflated home prices in the first place. Teachers, nurses, retail workers, they can't afford $400,000 starter homes, no matter how desperate sellers get. Number 14, Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Baton Rouge rode a wave of post-pandemic optimism, fueled by an influx of workers tied to Louisiana's booming petrochemical sector and a handful of high-profile corporate relocations. For a brief moment, it looked like the city was about to break out. Home values climbed steadily. New developments popped up in places like Prairieville and Central. Investors from Houston and Dallas started eyeing the market as a hidden gem. But by 2026, that momentum has completely reversed. Home prices have slipped about 7%, and properties that used to move within weeks are now languishing for months. The energy sector, which propped up much of the local economy, has cooled significantly. Hiring has slowed, projects have been delayed, and the workers who relocated for those jobs are starting to leave, taking their purchasing power with them. At the same time, insurance costs in Louisiana have become borderline catastrophic. Homeowners are facing premiums that have doubled or even tripled in just a few years, thanks to hurricanes, flooding, and a collapsing insurance market statewide. Buyers are walking away from deals the moment they see the insurance quotes. Sellers are stuck holding properties they can't unload without taking a loss. And the few transactions that do close are happening at prices nobody imagined possible just 2 years ago. Neighborhoods around LSU, once considered stable investments, are seeing declines as student enrollment flattens and rental demand softens. Suburban communities that banked on young families are dealing with a shrinking buyer pool as affordability evaporates under the weight of rising costs. Number 13, Albuquerque, New Mexico. Albuquerque has always been an underdog market, never flashy, never extreme, just steady and affordable. But the pandemic changed that. Californians and Texans discovered the city's charm, its wide-open skies, low cost of living, and proximity to Santa Fe's art scene. Home prices surged nearly 40% between 2020 and 2023. Suddenly, properties that sat on the market for months were getting multiple offers within days. Builders scrambled to keep up. Investors treated Albuquerque like the next Austin. But in 2026, that narrative has unraveled. Home values have dropped about 6%, and the market has gone eerily quiet. Listings in the Northeast Heights, Rio Rancho, and the West Side are sitting untouched. Sellers who priced their homes based on 2023 comps are slashing asking prices just to generate interest, and even then, showings are sparse. The issue isn't just demand cooling off. It's that Albuquerque's job market never caught up with the housing boom. Wages in the state remain among the lowest in the nation. The influx of remote workers has slowed to a trickle, and many of the out-of-state buyers who moved here during the frenzy have realized that New Mexico's charm doesn't offset its lack of economic opportunity. Crime rates, school quality, and infrastructure concerns are driving people away faster than the scenery can pull them in. Developers who built entire subdivisions on the city's outskirts are now sitting on unsold inventory. Homes that were supposed to be move-in ready are instead becoming financial liabilities, eating up holding costs while generating zero revenue. Number 12. Huntsville, Alabama. Huntsville spent the last decade being called the South's best-kept secret, a booming aerospace and defense hub, home to Redstone Arsenal and a rapidly growing tech sector. The city seemed destined for greatness. Between 2019 and 2023, home prices jumped more than 50%. National publications praised Huntsville as the future of affordable Southern living. Buyers from across the country poured in, convinced they'd found the perfect combination of growth, affordability, and opportunity. But 2026 has brought a harsh reality check. Home values have fallen roughly 7%, and the once red-hot market has cooled dramatically. Listings in Madison, Hampton Cove, and South Huntsville are sitting for months with minimal interest. Sellers are dropping prices, offering closing cost assistance, and throwing in everything from appliances to paid HOA fees just to close a deal. The problem is twofold. First, the defense sector, while still strong, isn't growing at the pace it was. Federal budget constraints and shifting priorities have slowed hiring and contract awards. The influx of high-paid engineers and contractors that fueled the housing boom has tapered off. Second, developers overbuilt. They looked at Huntsville's population growth and assumed it would continue forever. Instead, the pipeline of new residents has slowed, leaving the city with thousands of new homes and not enough buyers to fill them. Subdivisions on the outskirts of town that were supposed to sell out in months are still half empty. Number 11. Provo, Utah. Provo's rise was fueled by two powerful forces: remote work and Utah's reputation as one of the fastest-growing states in the nation. Nestled against the Wasatch Range, the city became a magnet for young families and tech workers looking for outdoor access, lower taxes, and a tight-knit community. Home prices surged nearly 60% between 2020 and 2023, turning Provo into one of the least affordable markets in the Mountain West. Investors bought up everything they could. Builders couldn't construct homes fast enough, and longtime residents watched in disbelief as their quiet college town transformed into a high-stakes real estate battleground. But in 2026, the bubble has burst. Home values have tumbled about 9%, one of the steepest drops in Utah. Properties in Orem, Springville, and even central Provo are sitting on the market for months with zero traction. Sellers are slashing prices, and buyers are walking away from deals, spooked by high interest rates and the fear that prices still have further to fall. The out-of-state migration that powered Provo's boom has slowed to a crawl. Remote work policies have tightened. Tech layoffs have wiped out a significant portion of the buyer pool, and many of the Californians who moved to Utah during the pandemic are either heading back or relocating to even cheaper states. At the same time, affordability has become a crisis for locals. the median home price still hovers around $500,000, far beyond what most Utah County residents can afford on local wages. Younger buyers, even those with decent incomes, are being priced out entirely. Number 10. Tacoma, Washington. Tacoma spent years being dismissed as Seattle's scrappy little sibling, the city people moved to when they couldn't afford anything closer to the Emerald City. But during the pandemic, that narrative shifted. Buyers fleeing Seattle's sky-high prices discovered Tacoma's waterfront charm, its revitalized downtown, and its relative affordability. Home prices exploded, climbing more than 55% in just 3 years. Neighborhoods like North End, Stadium District, and Proctor became hot commodities. Investors treated Tacoma like the next big thing. But in 2026, the shine has worn off completely. Home values have dropped roughly 10%, and the market is flooded with inventory nobody wants. Listings are sitting for 90 days or more. Sellers are cutting prices by tens of thousands of dollars and still not getting offers. The dream of Tacoma as Seattle's affordable alternative has collapsed under the weight of rising costs and a brutal economic reality. Seattle's tech sector, which indirectly propped up Tacoma's housing market, has been gutted by layoffs. Amazon, Microsoft, and a wave of startups have shed thousands of jobs, and the ripple effect has hit Tacoma hard. Buyers who might have considered the commute are now either unemployed or working remotely from cheaper states. At the same time, Tacoma's own economic base has proven too fragile to sustain the inflated prices. The port, while significant, doesn't generate the kind of high-wage jobs needed to support a median home price above $500,000. Local wages haven't kept pace, and first-time buyers have been completely priced out. Number 9. Cape Coral, Florida. Cape Coral was sold as a slice of paradise, a sunny Florida escape with waterfront access, warm winters, and a retirement dream come true. During the pandemic, it became one of the hottest markets in the entire country. Retirees fleeing cold climates and remote workers chasing sunshine sent home prices soaring by more than 65%. Developers built like there was no tomorrow. Investors snatched up properties sight unseen. And the city's population swelled as newcomers poured in by the thousands. But by 2026, the dream has turned into a nightmare. Home values have plunged about 11%, and the market is drowning in inventory. Listings are sitting for months with zero interest. Sellers are slashing prices, offering seller financing, and doing everything short of giving homes away just to escape. The collapse isn't a mystery. It's a perfect storm of insurance chaos, climate risk, and oversupply. Insurance premiums in Florida have skyrocketed, with many homeowners now paying $8,000, $10,000, even $12,000 a year just to insure a modest single-family home. Buyers are walking away from deals the moment they see the insurance quotes. Sellers can't absorb the cost and can't find buyers willing to take it on. Meanwhile, the threat of hurricanes looms larger every year. Ian's devastation is still fresh in people's minds, and the fear of another direct hit has turned Cape Coral from a paradise into a liability. Investors who bought rental properties are bailing out, vacation homeowners are dumping their second homes, and the retirees who moved here expecting tranquility are realizing that Florida's reality doesn't match the brochure. Entire neighborhoods in the northwest part of the city are filled with for-sale signs. Number 8. Stockton, California. Stockton has always been California's underdog, a city that never quite escaped its troubled past, but kept fighting for a better future. During the pandemic, it became a refuge for Bay Area buyers priced out of San Francisco, Oakland, and San Jose. Investors and commuters flooded in, driving home prices up by nearly 50% in just 2 years. Stockton was hailed as the next big opportunity, a place where you could still buy a house in California without selling a kidney. But in 2026, that optimism has evaporated. Home values have dropped about 9%, and the market is stuck in reverse. Listings are piling up, days on market are stretching into triple digits, and sellers are cutting prices just to generate a single showing. The problem is that Stockton's appeal was always based on one thing: affordability relative to the Bay Area. But as remote work policies ended and tech companies demanded employees return to the office, the long commute from Stockton to Silicon Valley became unsustainable. The buyers who drove the boom have left, and the local economy isn't strong enough to pick up the slack. Stockton's job market remains weak. Wages are low. Crime is still a concern, and schools struggle to compete with neighboring districts. The investors who bought rental properties thinking they'd cash in on steady demand are now dealing with vacancies and tenants who can't afford rent increases. Meanwhile, developers who built new subdivisions on the outskirts of town are sitting on unsold inventory. Homes that were supposed to attract first-time buyers are instead becoming baggage, weighing down balance sheets and forcing builders to offer steep discounts just to move units. Number 7. Greeley, Colorado. Greeley doesn't fit the typical image of a booming Colorado town. It's not a ski resort. It's not a tech hub. It's an agricultural city on the northern edge of the Front Range that suddenly found itself in the path of Denver's explosive growth. Between 2020 and 2023, home prices in Greeley shot up nearly 50% as buyers priced out of Denver, Boulder, and Fort Collins looked for cheaper alternatives. Developers built thousands of new homes. Investors piled in. And for a brief moment, Greeley looked like it was on the verge of a breakthrough. But in 2026, the momentum has disappeared. Home values have fallen about 8%, and the market has gone completely quiet. Listings are sitting untouched. Sellers are dropping prices and still not getting offers. The investors who bought rental properties expecting appreciation are now stuck with homes worth less than they paid. The issue is simple. Greeley's economy never justified the price surge. The city's job market is dominated by agriculture and oil and gas, industries that haven't seen the kind of growth needed to support a housing boom. The Denver commuters who drove demand during the pandemic have either moved back closer to the city or left Colorado entirely. And the affordability that once made Greeley attractive has disappeared. Median home prices are still hovering around $450,000, a number that makes no sense for a city where the median household income barely cracks $60,000. First-time buyers can't qualify. Move-up buyers are staying put, and out-of-state investors have moved on to other markets. Number 6. Reno, Nevada. Reno was the pandemic's ultimate success story, a scrappy desert city that transformed into a magnet for Californians fleeing high taxes, traffic, and expensive housing. Tesla's Gigafactory put Reno on the map. Remote work kept people coming, and home prices exploded by more than 60% between 2020 and 2023. Investors treated Reno like the next Austin. Developers raced to build, and longtime locals watched their affordable mountain town turn into an overpriced real estate circus. But in 2026, the party is over. Home values have dropped roughly 11%, and the market is collapsing under the weight of oversupply and fading demand. Listings in Spanish Springs, South Reno, and Sparks are sitting for months. Sellers are slashing prices and offering concessions that would have been unthinkable 2 years ago. The California exodus that powered Reno's boom has slowed dramatically. Remote work mandates have ended. Tech companies have shed jobs. And many of the people who moved to Reno during the frenzy have quietly moved back, realizing that Nevada's lack of state income tax doesn't make up for limited job opportunities and a harsh climate. At the same time, Reno's local economy hasn't kept pace with the inflated housing costs. Casinos and warehouses don't generate the kind of wages needed to support $500,000 starter homes. Younger buyers are priced out. Investors are losing money on rentals. And builders are sitting on spec homes nobody wants. Subdivisions on the outskirts of town that were supposed to sell out in weeks are still mostly empty. Number 5. Lakeland, Florida. Lakeland sits squarely between Tampa and Orlando, two of Florida's hottest markets, and for a while, that geography seemed like a gold mine. During the pandemic, buyers who couldn't afford either city started looking at Lakeland as the perfect compromise. Home prices surged nearly 55%. New developments sprang up across the city. Investors swooped in, and Lakeland briefly felt like it was about to become Florida's next big thing. But in 2026, that fantasy has shattered. Home values have tumbled about 10%, and the market is stuck in freefall. Properties are sitting for months. Sellers are cutting prices by $30,000, $40,000, sometimes more, and still not getting offers. The insurance crisis that's crippling the rest of Florida has hit Lakeland especially hard. Premiums have doubled or tripled, and buyers are walking away from deals the moment they see the numbers. Sellers are stuck holding properties they can't unload without taking massive losses. At the same time, the remote workers and retirees who fueled Lakeland's boom have stopped coming. The initial wave has passed, and there's no second act. The local job market, dominated by logistics and agriculture, doesn't generate the kind of incomes needed to support median home prices above $350,000. Developers who built neighborhoods aimed at out-of-state buyers are now sitting on rows of empty homes. Spec houses are becoming liabilities. Number 4. Boise, Idaho. Boise's fall from grace is one of the most dramatic housing stories of the decade. The city went from being America's hottest market during the pandemic to one of its biggest busts in 2026. Between 2020 and 2022, home prices in Boise skyrocketed by more than 70%, driven by an unstoppable wave of remote workers fleeing California, Washington, and Oregon. Developers couldn't build fast enough. Investors treated Boise like digital gold, and locals watched in horror as their quiet mountain town turned into an unaffordable frenzy. But by 2026, the crash is undeniable. Home values have plunged roughly 13%, one of the steepest declines in the entire country. Listings are piling up in Meridian, Eagle, Nampa, and even central Boise. Sellers are slashing prices and still not getting offers. The market has gone from red hot to ice cold in less than 2 years. The reason is simple. The remote workers who drove Boise's boom have left. Companies ended work-from-home policies. Tech layoffs gutted the buyer pool, and many of the transplants who moved to Idaho during the pandemic have quietly returned to the coast, realizing that Boise's charm doesn't make up for its isolation and lack of career opportunities. What's left is a local economy that was never equipped to handle the inflated prices. Teachers, nurses, and service workers can't afford $550,000 homes. First-time buyers are completely priced out, and the investors who bought rental properties are bleeding money as vacancies climb and tenants push back on rent increases. Number 3. Austin, Texas. Austin's housing market was untouchable for years. The city was the darling of the tech world, a magnet for startups, venture capital, and high-paid engineers fleeing Silicon Valley. Home prices more than doubled between 2019 and 2023. Bidding wars were standard. Buyers waived everything just to compete, and Austin wore its growth like a badge of honor. But in 2026, the market has turned vicious. Home values have dropped about 12%, and the slide shows no signs of stopping. Listings in Zilker, East Austin, and even the wealthy enclaves of Westlake Hills are sitting untouched for months. Sellers are slashing prices and offering concessions, and buyers still aren't interested. The tech sector that built Austin has crumbled. Meta, Tesla, Oracle, and a wave of startups have slashed jobs. The high-earning renters and buyers who powered the market are gone, either laid off or relocated. And the new developments that were supposed to define Austin's future now sit partially empty, expensive monuments to overconfidence. Suburban areas like Pflugerville, Round Rock, and Kyle are suffering too. Builders who constructed entire neighborhoods on spec are now sitting on unsold homes. Investors who expected endless appreciation are underwater, stuck with properties worth far less than they paid. At the same time, affordability has become a joke. Even with prices falling, Austin's median home price is still over $500,000, a number that makes no sense for a city where layoffs are rampant and wages are stagnant. Number 2. Phoenix, Arizona. Phoenix was supposed to be different. The Sun Belt's crown jewel. A market that combined endless sunshine, explosive population growth, and a business-friendly climate that attracted companies and residents alike. Between 2020 and 2023, home prices in Phoenix surged more than 60%. Developers built like there was no limit. Investors poured in from across the country, and the city seemed unstoppable. But 2026 has shattered that illusion. Home values have crashed roughly 14%, one of the worst declines in the nation. Listings are flooding the market in Scottsdale, Tempe, Gilbert, and Mesa. Sellers are cutting prices by $50,000, $60,000, even $80,000, and still struggling to find buyers. The market has shifted from frenzy to freefall in less than 18 months. The problem is oversupply on a staggering scale. developers added more than 40,000 new units to the market in just 1 year, far more than Phoenix's population growth could absorb. At the same time, the migration wave that powered the boom has stopped. Remote work policies ended. Tech companies froze hiring. And many of the Californians who moved to Arizona during the pandemic are either leaving or regretting their decision as the brutal summer heat and rising costs set in. Phoenix's job market, once a strength, has stalled. Corporate relocations have slowed, hiring has flatlined, and the high-wage jobs needed to support expensive housing simply aren't materializing fast enough. Number 1. Austin, Texas. At the very top of this list sits a market so overheated, so overhyped, and so overdeveloped that its collapse was inevitable. Austin, Texas. No other city in America rode the pandemic housing wave harder or fell faster. For years, Austin was untouchable. It was the city everyone wanted to move to, the place where tech flourished, culture thrived, and the future felt wide open. Home prices didn't just rise, they skyrocketed, more than doubling in some neighborhoods between 2019 and 2023. Buyers paid whatever it took. Investors treated Austin like a can't-miss bet, and developers built with reckless confidence, certain the demand would never end. But in 2026, Austin's housing market is in ruins. Home values have plummeted roughly 15%, the steepest decline of any major metro in the country. Properties that sold for $800,000 in 2022 are now struggling to fetch $680,000. Sellers are desperate. Buyers have disappeared. And the market is littered with the wreckage of a boom that went too far. The tech industry that built Austin has collapsed. Layoffs have gutted the high-income workforce that kept prices inflated. Companies that relocated with fanfare are now quietly scaling back or leaving altogether. The remote workers who flooded in have moved on, chasing cheaper states or heading back to the coasts. What's left is a city drowning in inventory. Luxury condos downtown sit empty. Suburban developments in Pflugerville, Leander, and Hutto are filled with for-sale signs. And across America, the message is clear. No market is too hot to crash. If you found this breakdown eye-opening, make sure you're subscribed because the housing story is far from over. Share this with anyone thinking about buying or selling. And as always, the numbers don't lie.